Welcome. I'm Stephen Winnick of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. For many years, we have presented the Homegrown concert series featuring the best in folk music and dance from around the world. In the year 2020, because of the global pandemic, we shifted to producing an online video concert series, which we've been calling Homegrown at Home. So now in 2021, this is our second year of Homegrown at Home concerts. And we were very happy this year to invite Samite, an artist from Uganda, to come and perform in our series. So one challenge I have in doing these interviews is in pronouncing the names of people from a wide variety of cultures. So I'm going to ask Samite to introduce himself with his full name for us, if he would. Samite, please.
Samite Mulondo.
Well, Samite, thank you so much for being with us. It is great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'll just remind you that we first met back in the 1990s when you were doing you came to do a concert series in Philadelphia, and I was an assistant producer there. So we've known each other for a while, and I've also read interviews with you to sort of familiarize myself with your extraordinary story. So would you fill us in a little bit on your early life in Uganda?
Okay. I could go all the way back. Was a beautiful, really beautiful life. If you take me back, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but as a little kid, I just remember uh, waking up is sunshine, papaya, mangoes, sugarcane, and playing in following the river, playing in the forest, and just beautiful sounds from the forest. And of course, those are the things that went away when we had a dictator, Idi Amin Dada, come to power.
In those early days, tell me about your first experiences with music, if you could.
Okay, first of all, my grandfather used to play the wooden flute. So that was my introduction to paying attention to wooden instruments. And and then I went to the King's Palace. That's where I went to school. And there, every day, there were musicians who entertained the king. They would play drums and play all these string instruments and um, xylophone, and they would sing and dance. The king wasn't there to see them, but they would play every day as if he was there. And I just remember as a little kid waiting for my parents to pick me up, sitting there just soaking it all in. Those are my first, my early days. Also, there was a marching band in the King's Palace, and that would get my heart beating. Also,
Mhm.
I remember that. Yes.
So, what was your first instrument? When did you pick up an instrument?
I think my first instrument was voice,
Hmm.
because there was a lot of singing on my mother's side of the family. On my dad's side of the family, there's no music at all. They're all accountants. But on my mother's side of the family, there was a lot of music and singing. So I just remember call response, and people always sang to entertain and feel the love. And then of course I picked up the wooden flute.
You mentioned that on your father's side there was no music in the family.
No.
What was the attitude toward you starting to play music and you know making
My
it a career?
dad was very my dad was very disappointed. In fact, he was very upset. Like he called the flute the whistle.
Hmm.
How could my son play a whistle for a living? How could a general manager's son play a whistle? And it wasn't until way later when I went back to shoot a documentary for PBS, Song of the Refugee, that he heard me perform the flute and he started to cry. Then from there on, he'd be like, "Bring me that thing, bring the thing." So yeah, but for years he was very upset.
So that it must have been nice to have that validation finally in the end, even though it took a long time.
The, well, here's the thing: I didn't think I needed it, and I thought I don't care. But when he said, "Bring me the," did you bring it? Did you bring it? Oh, my heart just melted. Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So so those early days sadly ended, as you said, with the coup and Idi Amin coming to power. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so um, how did that immediately affect you and your life there?
Yeah. So what happened? Um, if you ever go under a tree, if there are birds in the tree and you clap really loud, they will stop singing. So all of a sudden, that music I was used to, because of the shooting, explosion, the birds became quieter because they don't like explosions. And as a musician, it really affected me. That was the beginning of that. But then, of course, later on, it was music that saved me or saved us as teenagers to survive that bad time.
Yeah. So at a certain point, though, um, it became obvious that you were going to have to leave Uganda. How did that happen?
It's a long story, but and an interesting story. A friend of mine and I got together during that time, and we wanted to change the way people felt. So we created a cover band called the Mixed Talents, and the Mixed Talents did cover songs. I did Rod Stewart, and my best friend did Kenny Rogers and Marvin Gaye, and we had a Bob Marley, and we were very, very popular. We made people really happy with the music. Um, One day I was having my shoes polished on the street in Kampala after doing all these concerts, and two policemen walked behind me, and they looked at me, and I was like, "What are they? Why are they looking at me?" At that time, I had relatives who had been kidnapped, and so I thought I was going to be the next victim. But when these two policemen came behind me, they came back and really stood behind me, and I was getting ready to fight with them because I did taekwondo at that time. Um, they said, "Samite, is that you?" And I said, "Yes." "Do you know who we are?" And I was like, "Policemen?" And thinking now they're going to start grabbing me. And they said, "Samite, you don't remember us? We are the ones who managed traffic last time you guys performed. When are you performing again?" To me, that was the time, because in my head I was ready to kill them on the street instead of being taken away like my brother, being tortured. I was like, in my head, I was entertaining, I would die here on the street, because we had the way they used to kill people was really bad, torture them and until you die. So I was like, I'd rather die fighting these guys. And I realized I was changing. I was ready to become a monster like everybody else, like all those soldiers that we hated. And the next day, I planned to leave, and that's how I left.
So
I went to Kenya. I went to Kenya and became a refugee there,
yeah.
basically. Yeah.
So before you left for Kenya, I mean, you mentioned that you played, um, in a cover band, which was very popular. Did you perform any traditional African music at that time as well, or had you focused on the cover songs?
No, we didn't. We were just playing just cover songs, and traditional music at that point wasn't accepted that much. As young people, we just wanted to be as Western as we could, as much as we could, as we could grasp. It was way after I became a refugee in Kenya that I started missing and saying, "Oh, I'd like to see a litungu. I'd like to see Intongoli. I'd like to see a kalimba." And I would ask people to bring me those instruments from Uganda. But while I was a teenager in Uganda, that wasn't the most important thing. It was after I lost it, then I really started to think back. Oh, I remember these musicians in the King's Palace playing this instrument. That's how it was. Yeah.
So I read some interviews with you where you told really interesting stories about sort of the way that you managed to get yourself in as a refugee in Kenya. That there were you pulled a couple of scams on people essentially in order to get yourself in there. Could you explain that a little bit?
Um, so to get in as a refugee was not that difficult, because you go to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and you declare that you can't, you need to be accepted. But then they put you in there with a bunch of people, and some of them are soldiers, some of them are rebels just waiting to return to fight to overthrow the government. Some of them are people who've just experienced some of the worst, and immediately they ask you your story, and you tell your story, because you're going to be interviewed. And if you pass that interview, then you become an official refugee. If you fail that interview, you could be taken to a Canada or another country, but we all wanted to be near Uganda. And so when I told them my story, they said, definitely you're going to fail the interview. So this one guy asked me, give me your cigarettes, because they give you a pack of cigarettes. And I didn't smoke. I said, if you give me your cigarettes, I will train you so you pass the interview. So he rewrote my whole story until I actually believed it. He would interview me every day until I believed my story. And then he said, you'll pass the interview. And I did pass the interview using this new story, which was I owned a garage and I fixed a car that belonged to the rebels. And the soldiers came looking for this car and they said, where's the manager of this place? And I pointed them towards the office. And when they ran to the office, that's when I took off. I believe that story because I told it to him every day for months. Because if I had told them the story that my brother was kidnapped, he was tortured and killed, my stepdad was kidnapped, tortured and killed, and I felt like I was about to start becoming a killer myself. So you don't pass that interview. It's all like, they can't really, they say, in fact, they ask stupid questions like, did you report it to the authority? Like, no, it's the authority we are running away from, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's amazing that you were able to, work that out and get yourself sort of legal status as a refugee. So,
In
so
Kenya,
that,
yes, yeah.
yeah, and it's amazing, I think, to people to hear that process, because from the outside, it would sound like your real story was actually much more compelling reason to be a refugee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
yeah,
know. And there was a guy there who, it was a sad story. He was an old man who jumped over a fence to run. When the soldiers came, they killed his wife. He said, I jumped over this, very high fence. They told him, show us, show us. Of course, without the adrenaline, the poor guy couldn't do it. So you couldn't tell the real story. You had to come up with a story that's going to convince them. Yeah.
So once in Kenya, you were able to join the African Heritage Band. Explain that period of your music a little bit, and joining the band too, which was an interesting story, if I remember.
Joining the band, that was was the top band in the country. African Heritage Band was a dream come true. So they had just lost their saxophone flute player, and they were interviewing people. So I went for the interview, and I told them that if you interview me on the flute, which I was really comfortable with, that's exactly how I play saxophone. But I don't have my saxophone. I left it in Uganda. And so they interviewed me on the flute and they gave me the job. 4 days, maybe 5 days later, I'm doing all these interviews. It's a big deal. The bass player comes in with a saxophone. And I was like, oh my goodness, my whole life has ended, But as a refugee, surviving, you come up with quick stories. So he looked away and I pulled all the pins from under the saxophone. And I say, you see this thing? This thing is broken, but I know how to fix it if you give me a few days. So he said, but the guy who gave it to me played it. I'm like, I don't know. It's broken. So as you can see. So I took it home. I didn't sleep for about 4 or 5 days. And actually, before I did that, I was taken to my girlfriend then took me to an American school. And the music teacher showed me how to put on the reed and how to choose which reed and how to blow. And the thing sounded so bad. It was squeaking like crazy. Eventually I stopped it from squeaking, but the sound was so rough, and I brought it back. I had to learn the songs. Luckily enough, the fingering on the flute wasn't very different from the alto saxophone that they brought me. So I came back and I played the songs, and they would ask me, how come your sound is rough? And I say, because I listen to Gerto Beberi. And that's the sound I like. So it took about a year before I told them the truth.
And the truth was that you really hadn't played the saxophone at all
I
before
said
that,
that
right?
was my first time to play this instrument.
Right. So yeah, so very clever way to make that work. And of course, as you said, your flute playing made up for it in the sense that
Hmm.
you were really an expert on that and did a great job in that band on the flute, and were able to add some saxophone as well. So well done. That's a great story as well.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
and also traditional instruments then came in too. Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that because you told a story within your concert about getting a litungu when you were in Kenya, and you told the story um, without actually telling the names of some of the people involved. So I wonder if it's possible to reveal a bit more of that story because it's a great tale.
Hmm. So I was driving because I had left the refugee camp at that point, and I was in African Heritage Band, you know, and I was driving my friend's car in Nairobi, and I saw this old man, tall old man. He looked like my grandfather. He was dressed in old clothes. It looked like the ground opened up, and this guy walked out. And I was driving, and I knew very strongly I needed to become his friend. So I stopped the car in the middle of the street. And this is like you can't do that in Nairobi. The streets, people are
Yeah.
always late going somewhere, you know. So I stopped in the middle of the street and I begged the old guy, please get into my car. And he refused. So I thought maybe if I pull him, that would be okay. So I started to pull him because the drive was overwhelming. And I pulled him and he pulled in the other direction. He was holding the litungu, uh, one like this, exactly this, and and he pulled back, and eventually, with the horns, everybody honking for me to get back into my car, um, and move the car from the street. He became really scared, and I gave up. I went back into the car, and then I said, "Try one more time." So I jumped out of the car and ran towards him. And this time, the poor old guy decided to run into the oncoming traffic to get away from this madman. And I said, "I'm a musician." And the moment I said that, he said, "Why didn't you say that right away?" So he jumped into the front seat, and I took him home, made him tea, and we talked, shared stories, and he he was just an amazing old guy. And then I said, "When can I meet you again?" So we chose a tree. And I said, exactly in a month's time, I'll wait under this tree. And I waited under the tree, and this old guy came, but this time he had another instrument. He had two litungus. And he said, "I brought you a gift, an instrument I used to play when I was young." And I took him home. I made him more tea, and we talked. I said, "Can you show me how you tune it?" So he showed me. And it ended up being one of my main instruments, one of my main healing instruments. But to make the story complete, as recent as just before COVID started, a group of young musicians were going on somewhere to perform, Utica near here, and they stopped by the house. And it so happened that one of the musicians knew the old guy, and he told me he just died, and they actually collected money for his funeral. So I was like, oh my goodness, I got very excited. Yeah.
And you encountered him later as well, and on ethnomusicologists tapes in Ithaca.
Yes. Oh my goodness, you know more stories about me than I do know myself. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Uh, everyone would tell me that, Samite, you need to meet this ethnomusicologist at Cornell University, Professor Martin Hatch. And I was like, really? Why do I need to meet him? He says, oh, he'll be so excited to meet someone who plays these traditional instruments. So I met the professor, and he took me to into his basement. And he said, "You're from East Africa." And he was, he had hair going crazy all over the place. And his shoes were bent on one side. And I thought he was a little crazy. And because professors in Uganda dress really well. And he took me into the basement, and he went down on his knees looking for a certain cassette. And he found it, and he screamed, "Here!" And he plugged it in. It was this old man being interviewed, saying his name, and probably playing this same litungu. And so I screamed. I got very excited.
Yeah. Do you mind telling us his name?
To tell you the truth, I just know they call him Muse, which is old man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I don't, they just called him Muse with the
Okay.
litungu. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, a wonderful story, and just amazing how his life connected with yours over a long period of time. As you say, he passed away a few years
Mm-hmm.
ago, but I believe he lived a very long time. He was maybe 100 years old or so when he
Yes,
passed
he was
away. So
very, very old. Yes, and he touched a lot of people in that village.
yeah,
Apparently, he had a really big funeral. Yes.
yeah. So so thanks for telling us that wonderful story again. You mentioned also other African traditional instruments that you started to play during your time in Kenya. What
Mm-hmm.
other instruments came to you around that time?
I started playing the kalimba, the thumb piano,
Hmm.
and the guy who used to play the kalimba in the band, his name was Ayub Ogada. He passed away actually also recently. He's a well-known musician. He played one of his songs is in a very famous movie, Constant Gardener.
Hmm.
A very catchy song. I asked him, can you show me how to play the kalimba? And he said, no, I'm not going to show you. Which was very surprising. But I remembered that, in back of my house, my mother used to rent to, people from northern part of Uganda, and they used to play the kalimba. So I just decided, I started recalling what they used to do. So I came up with my own style of playing the kalimba by just trying to remember what they used to do. And one of the things I did different from when you hear other people who play that instrument, I use my thumb instead of my fingernails.
Hmm.
So my sound is very, very smooth compared to a lot of, there's not as much clank, clank, clank.
Yeah.
But it was because I was teaching myself how to play that instrument. Yes.
But you can always adapt it to your own style if you do it that way. You don't have a
Exactly.
teacher telling
Exactly.
you how it has to be done.
In fact, it just it since then it's taught me that it doesn't matter what instrument it is. If you hide away for minimum of say 6 months and just play and play every day, you could come up with your own style and just become really good at that weird style of yours. Um, I think when I'm gone, people will be like Samite style, but because I've, I've I've used it on many other instruments actually. Just
Yeah,
hide away for a period and just really focus every single day playing that instrument. If you're not taught, you come up with a style of playing that instrument.
great. So how long did you stay in Kenya before you moved
5
again?
years.
Hmm.
5 years. Hmm.
And after that, you decided to come to the U.S. So how did that come about?
Well, my girlfriend then worked for the U.S. Embassy, USAID. We felt we were not safe. We felt like somebody was always following us. We would see people following us, same people in like you see in a cartoon, reading the newspapers upside down. And we didn't know whether there were people who were going to kidnap and take me back to Uganda. Uh, we didn't know why they were following us. I think we later on found out that they were following us because of her position at at USAID. They wanted to make sure she didn't, she was connected to some sensitive papers, I think, and so it was actually the U.S. government that was following her. Was using the Kenyan, CID guys to follow to make sure who she mixed with, and so it's a long story, but we didn't know if it was somebody who was going to kidnap me and take me back to Uganda. So we decided to come to the U.S. and move to New York City, which was a different story.
So what was it like in New York City?
New York City, for me, was a big shock at first because I had never seen poor white people. Because every white person who comes to Uganda is either doctor, a lawyer, and or a missionary, or people were just coming on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came to New York City, they told me, make sure you don't go on that street. There are homeless people there. And of course, that's where I went to see what they mean by homeless people. And I just remember seeing a homeless man sitting in his chair, folded like this. And I watched him for a long, long, long time. In fact, he inspired me to write a song, My Name Is Not Homeless. My mother calls me baby. But it was interesting to see cars parking big limos, and the dog gets out to go get a manicure. And then right nearby, there'll be a very poor person. So it was overwhelming for me. And also it was the first time I realized that you cannot just lean on anybody's car to talk to another friend, because they think you're going to break in. And coming from Uganda, we're the majority, and I'm from a well-to-do family. So nobody would ever think I'm going to break in. So that was a real deep, a little bit of an adjustment. And I didn't feel comfortable there. So I moved to a little town called Ithaca, New York, where nobody could call you a thief. You could lean on any car or do whatever you want, as long as you pretend you're a vegetarian.
Right. So, yeah, beautiful town, Ithaca, and you've lived in or near Ithaca for many years now. So what was life like when you arrived there?
Ithaca, it was very welcoming. Everybody, people are warm, people are very kind. But they're mostly, you had to, they prefer people being vegetarians. So I quickly learned that, when they invite me to a place, I would, fill my stomach with a chunk of beef and then go enjoy the tofu and sprouts, and pretend I like it. But the most weird thing is, right now, I'm actually close to being a vegetarian, then, because, eventually it catches up on you. Yeah.
Right. Right. So how did you sort of restart your music career? I mean, you'd been in a prominent band in Kenya, and then you came to the United States, and, you had to start all over.
Yeah. I had an aunt who lived in California, Auntie Jane. She passed away also recently. She told me, don't spend one single day looking back and say, I was big, things were better. Just every single day, start every single day as a new day. Don't ever, and that was the best advice, because otherwise you could get depressed. Nobody knows who you are. You don't have a work permit. You're waiting to be, you're waiting to pass the interview, and the interviewers don't understand anything about what it means to run away from a country.
Yeah.
So that was a really difficult time, but I focused mostly on my instruments. I focused on multi-layering my music. I came with a, I don't know, this is a very long story, but before I came to move to the US, maybe a few months before that, somebody brought me to the US to perform at Belk's store. It's in the South.
Mm-hmm.
They call it Belk's, like a mall. And I'd met some people who were starting a clothing thing called Banana Republic, and they had their friends. So through their connection, I ended up coming to the U.S. To New York City, and on my way to go to North Carolina to perform in the shopping mall, and they told me, you know what, your music is being played on Good Morning America, and I said, what is that? And they said, it's a TV. It's a TV thing. It's a big deal. And I said, I haven't made any deals with anybody. I haven't made any deals with Good Morning America. I don't know who they are. So my girlfriend then called them and said, we hear that you're using my boyfriend's music. And they said, no, we don't. We don't use music that is not licensed, or we haven't. So anyway, when we arrived in North Carolina, these people had recorded it, and it was my music. So when we came back to New York City, she called them and said, guess what? Yes, you used his music. And they said, that was a mistake. Our producer was there in Kenya and picked up this cassette. We didn't think, anything big about it. And unfortunately, your music is not copyrighted in Washington. And we had copyrighted it. And we said, no, it is copyrighted. We even have, we have everything. And they said, oh, come over, let's talk. So they gave her about, I didn't go along. They gave about maybe $4,000 or $5,000, which was a lot of money for me. So I bought my really nice first recording 4-track recorder at Samite music store, and so basically I had that machine when I came back here to live in Ithaca, and I spent a lot of time overdubbing and learning how to overdub the kalimba. So I'd play one kalimba and then I'd play another one and I'd play more kalimbas because I didn't have a band and I didn't have musicians. So it just was the foundation of what my music is, where there's a lot of layers. I layer things. I put one kalimba and I put another one and I put one voice and I add another voice. So, things I used to hear Barry White do. We hear one Barry White voice here and then you hear another one in the back. So yes. I had this 4-track recorder. I started doing that with my traditional instruments. And that was the beginning of a new style of music where, that you hear of me doing right now. Was that time I was waiting to get a work permit, just sitting at home using this machine.
So that sort of suggests that even when you were in Kenya, you had started to record sort of solo projects. How did that come about?
So I went back with this machine when I came here the first time. So I took it back and started recording multi-tracking. And my band, the African Heritage Band at that point had split up. Mm-hmm. So I started recording my first projects, and it was very nice to see that people were reacting to it, because originally it was just for me. I was playing music just to heal myself, and then people would just say, "I like the music. I like that instrument," and so that was it. So I just layering and layering, things like that. Yeah.
So you're just learning to do the recording sort of stuff yourself at home, mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was interested to find out was that some of your early influences after that, when you were already starting to do that, one of the people who helped you out was Joseph Shabalala from Ladysmith, Black Mambazo. So explain how that happened.
Just like all my stories, they are all kind of long, but so when I arrived in Ithaca and I started performing, my first performance in Ithaca was in a little club called The Haunt, smoky little place. A guy came and said, "Samite, what are you doing in Ithaca? I saw you in Africa. I saw you at this Mount Kenya Safari Club where I used to perform after my band split up." And I said, I came to move here. I'm going to be living here. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I would like to learn how to really record for real, take some lessons, and become a recording engineer." And he said, "Guess what? I know an engineer who teach you." So he took me to this place. It's called CAF Audio. And there's an engineer called Alfred. He took me in. And I said, "Alfred, I don't have money to pay you." He said, "If you promise to be a guinea pig with all those instruments you play, my students would enjoy recording that." So I became a guinea pig for his students, and I was learning at the same time. And we were doing interesting things where I would take the kalimba next to a river stream, and they would record the stream, and it was really beautiful. And I was learning a lot. Then one day he said, "You have to bleep this, but that shit of yours could be recorded for real." And I said, "I don't have money." And he said, "Well, the guy who introduced you to me is a millionaire." And I said, "Really?" So he said, "I'll talk to him for you." So he talked to this Fred, to this, what's his name now? Cleveland. He talked to him and he said, so, can you pay for Samite's recording? And Eric Cleveland. And Eric said, sure. So Eric paid for my recording. And we did my first album called Abana Bakesa, Dance My Children Dance. And then we were like, what are we going to do with it? And so Eric said, you know what? I have a friend I used to play with in high school. And he moved to New York City. I hear he's in the music industry. So he contacted his friend. And it so happened that his friend now was the manager for Ladysmith Black Mambazo. And it didn't take long. I was in the car with Eric going to New York City with Eric and his wife. And we met Paul Simon. And we met all these different powerful Huma Sekela, all these amazing musicians. And then they said, okay, we like your music, but we don't know how the audience will react to it. So they said, we want to put you on the road with this group called Ladysmith Black Mambazo from South Africa. So they introduced me to Joseph, and Joseph was just warm. He just took me in, and we went on the tour bus with them. They just put me in one of the bunk beds on the tour bus. I had never been on a bunk bed in a tour bus. I'd never been on a tour bus before. And so I started opening for them around the country. It was sold out, audiences everywhere. But Joseph would talk to me at the end of the concert. It's important when you finish performing to not get drunk, so you can be fresh the next day. You don't have to take drugs to be fresh the next day. He was very, very, very nice. He was very warm. And I just remember one of the things, they used to like to watch Pee Wee Herman. Mm-hmm. So we watched Pee Wee every night, and they would go, oh yeah, but it would be the same story. Somebody would steal Pee Wee's bike or something, and they'd, you. So at the end of the tour, I totally understood everything they were saying, because they are Bantu speaking, and I'm a Bantu speaking. I'm in Uganda, and somehow there was some migration. I don't know who came from where. I don't know if we migrated south or from there.
Right.
I don't know that history, but
they're all related
yes,
languages.
Bantu,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Bantu migration. So at the end of the tour, I could understand everything they were saying, but I just remember watching Pee Wee Herman every day at the end of the concert. That was our entertainment. Mm-hmm.
So when you were playing solo in those days, how did you achieve your layered sound?
So that was very interesting because at that time I had just recorded that album, Dance My Children Dance. So Alfred, the engineer, took out my voice, he took out the kalimba, whatever instrument I wasn't playing. And so there was some drums already recorded on it. And I had it on a cassette. So we had a cassette player on stage.
Oh.
So I would push play, and I'd start singing along and playing the flute or singing along. And at the end of the song, the audience would clap and say, "Mo!" So I would push play and rewind at the same time, to find out the beginning of the song. The audience was very patient. I would just rewind until, because I didn't know where the next song was starting, because it was a cassette. It's not digital that you just push. You have to go play.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would do 2 songs or 3 they would ask for more songs, and I would just push, play and rewind to know where I was. So that's how I did those performances.
Yeah. And that you were able to do that as a kind of street musician as well. So it's kind of a versatile process, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
but it's amazing that the audience allowed me to do that. They were very
nice. People were tolerant of the technology that existed at the time, right? Everyone understood what that was, and nowadays people would be very puzzled, by that whole idea.
What's wrong with him? Yes.
Yeah.
but one thing that I have to tell you, when I started doing my own performances after I stopped touring with Ladysmith Black Mambazo, I thought because we had sold out audiences everywhere. I thought that will follow me everywhere. So it was a big shock that I didn't have sold out houses, of 2,000 people screaming. So I realized, oh my goodness, these people, these guys have worked hard to get where they are. They built all this following, which was so easy for me to open for them, and felt like they were my audience, But they were actually, they're Mambazo's audiences, And so that was a learning thing for me, and to respect and appreciation for Black Mambazo taking me on the road.
Yeah. Yeah, it must have been a great moment in your career to see what that was like, but you went in a somewhat different direction in terms of the kinds of audiences that you sought. And one person who was involved in that a little bit was someone who's very dear to us because he's visited us a lot and we have his collections, and that's the late Pete Seeger. Explain how Pete influenced you.
So everywhere where I went, people would tell me, somehow you remind us of Pete Seeger. Somehow you remind us of this guy, Pete Seeger. And I'm like, who is this guy, Pete Seeger? Everybody keeps talking about. And one day I was sitting at home and the phone rang and he said, hey, Samite, this is Pete Seeger. And I'm like, oh, I've been hearing your name everywhere I go. Who are you? So you write music? Because I started asking him these questions, and I said, yeah, I sing, and you probably know some of my music. I'm like, I don't think so. And he says, you do. So I started singing songs, and like a few hours later, we were still singing, this song that he had, his songs, and I realized I knew his music. So we became very close very quickly, and he invited me over to Clearwater Festival. And I went over and we sat under a tree and talked and shared stories. And he said, I don't want what happened to my friend Tracy Chapman. I said, what happened to Tracy? He said, Tracy was boosted all the way up and then they cut off her legs. I said, then you're no longer happening. I said, you don't allow that to happen. You need to dump your management. Leave your management, because my managers were going for big money, building me up to be a big performer who asked real big money. Says your music needs to reach even those who can't pay. You need to bring your music to everybody. It's okay to make money, but your music needs to be brought to even the poorest, those who can't even afford to pay for your concert. So I went home and, I think growing up, we have this thing in Africa where you have to respect old man's wisdom. And he was very convincing that I called my manager and I said, you are fired. You're no longer my manager. And my manager thought I was joking, because who fires such a management? Who managed Ladysmith Black Mambazo, connected to Paul Simon? And I didn't have any money. And so Pete Seeger said, it will all work out, trust me. So I let my manager go and I started booking myself, and I started doing concerts for, refugees, started doing concerts for, some of the poor places. And I think it's been a very good journey, sharing my music with some of the, disadvantaged and some of, distressed people. Yeah.
One project that you engaged in after that was Song of the Refugee. You mentioned refugees and you were a refugee. Explain that project a little bit, because I think it'd be very interesting for our audiences.
Mm-hmm. So I was doing a concert upstate New York, and this gentleman came, Glenn Ivers, and he said, my children were all conceived to your music. And I didn't know what to do with that information, but he said, would you be interested to meet them? So I met the kids, and they said, this is Samite, the music you listen to. And the kids looked at me like, whatever. They were like really young. It wasn't as exciting to them as their dad was. And he said, Samite, there's so much going on in Africa that is so negative. There, the wars going on in Rwanda, massacres going on in Liberia. Would you be interested to go and, make a difference? with your music. And at that point, I just said, yeah, sure, I'd like to go. But I was afraid of going back to Africa at that time myself. But Glenn didn't look like he could really afford to put together this trip. The way he was dressed, I thought he was just talking. So I said yes, but a few months later, he convinced PBS that to air the documentary we're going to shoot in Africa called "The Song of the Refugee." So we ended up going to Liberia, and that's when I found out that just by playing a wooden flute, I could get these kids who'd seen so much suffering, who'd seen their parents killed, who were just glassy-eyed like this, and flies were going in and around their eyes. They didn't even blink. It was really like shocking. I found out just by playing the flute, the kids would start singing again. They would start pulling on my shirt. I have a song. And the mothers would start singing. And eventually even the men would come and join in and sing. And this happened from every refugee camp we went. And that changed my life right there. It gave me some new understanding why I was a musician. Gave me some new understanding my responsibility, and also what Pete Seeger was talking about, that your music needs to be brought to people who can't even afford to pay. That was when it all kind of gelled together. And I started an organization called Musicians for World Harmony, which brings music to the distressed around the world, and also people with dementia, and we're wherever we know music is going to make a difference. Yeah,
that's wonderful. So thank you for all of your efforts in that area, as well as you're simply being a musician. So one of the things that's interesting is we mostly present traditional music in the series, and your music is deeply rooted in the tradition, but in fact you write most of your songs. So explain your songwriting process too, and how that grows out of the traditions that you learned as a child and as a young man.
Mm-hmm. So many of my songs come in my dreams. They come in my dreams if I've been nice to people, if I've done something really nice. In fact, I recently got one, which it hasn't been like that in a while, where I get inspired in it, and somebody's teaching me a song and I'm singing, and like this time there was a woman. Usually it's a woman. It's never been a guy, but I was singing, and one kid came and listened to the song, and soon I had about 100 kids singing this song, and many also came in. So I usually record that melody, whatever it is, and then I start to learn it afterwards. And then sometimes I take that melody and I combine it with a traditional old story that I remember my mother telling me, or a traditional old song. I just kind of work on it. But when I first get it in my dream, I don't even know what it is when I wake up in the morning. Like what I just recently recorded. Right now, I haven't even actually had a chance. I recorded it on my phone. I haven't had a chance to even listen to it. But that's how the music is written.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And through writing your own songs and creating your own music, you've had a long career of producing your own recordings as well. What are some of your favorite recording projects over the years that you've done?
Well, tell you the truth, recently some people came to me and said, we are working in Africa. They're doctors, and they're working with the people who are dying. They're teaching people in Uganda to do palliative care. And so it was a film, called, what's the name of the film actually? Oliotia. Yeah, Oliotia, which is How Are You? And so these doctors go into the villages in Uganda, and they help people who are dying with palliative care. And they're teaching Ugandan doctors to do palliative care. And so when I started working on that project, I thought it was maybe one of the most powerful things, because you see the joy of these patients when the doctors come to visit again. And the doctors are very kind, and they're holding their hands, and the patients are saying, when I get out of here, I'm going to cook you a meal. Obviously, many of them end up dying. But that recording project was one of the most, that I felt I was inspired to do. And it was actually nominated. One of the songs was nominated with Hollywood Music in the Media Award recently. It didn't win, though. Yeah.
Well, but congratulations. Often being nominated is the real reward, because it's so hard to be that one that's chosen. So congratulations on the nomination.
Thank you.
What is your latest recording project that you've done?
That's actually the latest record.
That is the one. Okay.
Yeah, the nomination just happened just a few weeks ago, a few months
Great.
ago.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you also had a project that I remember from a few years back that was called Resilience. Explain that one a little bit, because I think that, had a lot to do with your story as well.
Yeah. So the name of the project, actually, before I talk about resilience, is called "We Can Care Again."
The one, your most recent one, is what you're saying.
The recent one, yeah, it's called "We Can Care Again" because I felt like we stopped caring. I felt like wherever the energy that was happening around me and around, the world, people just stopped caring, and I thought the only way to go was to say we can care again, because it's important to care about your neighbors. It's important to care about the person around you. So that was the force behind me writing this album. We can care again.
And I can tell you, I streamed it just last night, and it's a lovely, lovely album. So,
thank you. Resilience was inspired actually when I felt like again things were going crazy with people falling apart and not caring again, and also felt like, how do we survive all these difficult things that are coming to us right now? And throughout my life, I've been inspired by people who've gone through some of the worst atrocities. And also working with my horses, seeing them enjoying my music when I'm playing my flute. It's just the whole thing about resilience and adapting. And I feel like as human beings, we have very strong will to survive. We just need to be led by our leaders to go in the right direction. We're very resilient. You find people who've gone through some of the worst atrocities in some of the places I've gone, like in Congo, where there are wars and women are abused and attacked, and I'm talking about ages from little ones to 80 years old telling you stories. But you find that when I bring music, they start singing, they start dancing, they start smiling, and then they start telling stories. So the human beings are very resilient. So that was kind of the inspiration for that album. Yeah.
And we're going through right now a global pandemic, which is testing our resilience also. How has your music changed or been affected by the pandemic?
I would say it's almost like selfish because I'm just me and my instruments, and not hanging out with so many people. In the beginning of COVID, all musicians were all panicking and trying to see how we can play together over Zoom, over another software. We are trying out 1 million software, and then there was so much latency that it was so frustrating to perform together. And then I went into this place where, what about me connecting with my instruments? How about learning some new instruments? How about just digging in? So it's kind of a selfish thing, but it doesn't end up just being selfish, because in the end I'm going to share what comes out of it. But I just went inwards. I just kind of dug in to find deep inside, to find out what is who I am. And of course, I keep saying the horses.
Yeah.
They've been extremely inspiring. So that's how I've survived COVID. It's just playing music and playing, learning new instruments, and just taking my time. And with that, because there's so much time, you have so much time. Um, so that's what it is right now. It's just digging in, and there's not so much around me. Using the little you have to find the sweetest moment that touches your heart, just inside.
Yeah.
That's what I've been digging in right now. And I think one of the instruments that really has taken over, you might say, it's called adungu. I don't know if you can see it right now.
Oh yeah,
See?
beautiful.
That has become my savior.
So that's a traditional harp.
It's a
Is it?
traditional harp from Uganda.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So you've learned a new instrument. I mean, you said that one of the early things that you learned was if you lock yourself away with an instrument for 6 months, that good things will happen. And this has given
Exactly.
you another opportunity for that. So
I've been talking through this instrument, yeah, through COVID. It's become my new love. This adungu, and because I didn't have anybody to teach me how to play it, I had to go dig in and let the instrument show me where it wanted me to go. Yeah.
well, I think collectively, all of your fans around the world can't wait to hear what you're going to do with it on your future projects. So Samite, I just want to one more time thank you so much for being part of the Homegrown concert series and for being part of this interview series as well. Samite,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you.